Hi, welcome back to Tech Talk Tuesdays with me, Nisa, and Orbtronics. Today, I would like to welcome Mr. Jurgen Montoute, a fund manager at BOSL Global Investment Fund Management Company. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Nisa. Happy to be here.
Yes. So, Jurgen, tell us a little bit more about what drew you to investment banking and what keeps you passionate about finance and capital markets in a market like St. Lucia.
Yeah, for sure. So, a little bit about my background. I graduated from Rutgers Business School, New Brunswick in New Jersey. I double majored in finance and labor studies. And when I graduated, I started off my career at Goldman Sachs in New York. I worked in the finance division. I covered some of the private equity portfolios under the merchant banking division. So in terms of the actual strategies, there was some illiquid private equity in the principal strategic investments team. So that's like Fintech mostly. I also covered the urban investment group, which is like the social impact investing. That's real estate focused. Did a little bit of work on alternative energy as well. So I did that for just over 2 years, and then I moved back to St. Lucia in 2020, where I started working at Invest St. Lucia, doing investment promotion and facilitation. A lot of my work was around like manufacturing, local business, helped out on a few infrastructure related projects as well. But then I felt like I needed to get back to my roots really. So I joined Bank of Saint Lucia in 2023. And, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm a fund manager where I manage portfolios for both BOSL as well as some of our external clients. So we manage portfolios for pension funds, high net worth individuals, corporates, government entities, other financial institutions. Truly global investing strategy. And in terms of what keeps me passionate about the markets, I think that when I chose my course of study, I would have chose that finance and labor studies because I believe that the capital markets, whether that be human or financial capital, is pretty much what drives development. And, I'm very passionate about Caribbean economic development, and, that's what pretty much ignites my fire and keeps me going on a day-to-day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting, especially your move from the US and Goldman Sachs to being back home and being with BOSL. How has your perspective on wealth building evolved over your career?
Right. So in terms of my thoughts on wealth building, I would say that it hasn't really changed per se. I think that in terms of the strategy, it's like you take a long-term approach and you try to be consistent. You don't overcomplicate it or anything like that. When it comes to wealth building, it's a lot more boring than most people think. But you kind of want it to be boring. You just kind of consistently try to build your little empire or your army of dollars, I like to call it. In terms of it like evolving or anything like that, like that's kind of my thoughts on it. And in general, I believe that investing, wealth building, it's for everybody, so it should be inclusive.
Yeah, I was actually just about to ask, do you think investment banking in the Caribbean actually is too elitist or inaccessible to the average person?
Yeah, so I'd say maybe before there were some challenges in making it more accessible. So in terms of the Caribbean banks actually accessing a lot of the international markets, there were certain challenges in terms of getting like the correspondent banks or setting up those custodian accounts. I don't want to get too technical into it, but I'd say like now as we've gained a little bit more scale, we're getting a bit more experienced and also audacious. we've been able to figure out ways that we can structure things to be more inclusive and bring down some of those investment minimum amounts and, bring down a lot of the requirements as well.
Yeah, could you let us know a little bit more about BOSL Fund Management Company? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so BOSL Fund Management Company, we're a subsidiary of Bank of Saint Lucia. We encompass their entire wealth of experience in the asset management space. So we manage just over 1.6 billion EC in assets. And, like I mentioned earlier, we manage funds for pension funds, high net worth individuals, corporates, government institutions, as well as some other financial institutions in the region.
Okay, so being that I am not necessarily, and most of our listeners are necessarily high net worth individuals, could you let me know how can a novice investor like me get started?
Right. So, January 2024, we had launched our mutual funds, which were the first mutual funds launched by an indigenous bank in the OECS. And, we came out with 3 different funds for, people with different objectives or risk tolerances, we like to call it. And in terms of how you can get started through these mutual funds, it kind of gives you access to a basket of stocks and bonds. So we have 3 of them. Our income fund, which invests in a pool of different bonds, international as well as regional, local. We also have our growth fund, which is the more aggressive option. It invests in an international pool of stocks, so shares of ownerships in actual companies. So like your Google, your Amazon, etc. And then we have our balance fund, which is a combination of the stocks and bonds. So some of the safety from the bonds and some of the upside from the stocks. And it's just a mix for those in-between investors.
So how quickly can I get started? What would I need?
Yeah, so in terms of getting started, you just need one form of government issued ID, and our brokers would help you fill out the necessary account application forms. And you'd be on your way. The minimum investment is 200 USD or 540 EC. And in terms of additional contributions, it's 50 US, but there's no obligation for you to do maybe a monthly contribution or something like that. It's kind of come and go as you please.
Okay, could we get a list of brokers or what are the brokers that come first?
Yeah, right now locally, we have BOSL Investment Banking as well as First Citizens. For BOSL, they require one form of government ID, the application forms. For First Citizens, it's 2 forms of IDs, I believe, and they also help you out with the application forms and so on.
Okay, what's one rule you think though that every new investor should follow?
Keep it simple. That's what I'd say. Keep it simple. When people start thinking about okay, every time I make $100, I'm gonna invest $20 out of it, and this week I'm gonna take 35% of my tips from whatever job, and this week whatever I was supposed to spend on going out, don't overcomplicate it. Try to come up with a number that you can save consistently. Everybody's situation is different, so I won't say you should have a hard and fast rule, but try to come up with something that works for you and just be consistent.
Yeah, that sounds good. Is there hype around crypto and forex trading? Is that doing more harm than good to young investors?
So what I would say when it comes to crypto, forex, just speculative assets on a whole, I wouldn't say it's necessarily harmful per se, because it does initiate interest in the markets, I would say. I think it's also important that people get their feet wet and realize that, hey, this is a lot more difficult than people make it seem, and that you probably want to, when you're getting started, to go start that journey with people who actually know what they're doing and who can also impart some of that knowledge to you.
Yeah. So getting their feet wet and getting started in investing. I think recently in Saint Lucia, there was the rise of a pyramid scheme known as Creators Alliance. Why do you think schemes like this are still so attractive?
Right. So I think in a situation where people are trying to get ahead in life, sometimes they see the hype surrounding some of these get rich quick schemes. To that, I would kind of tell people as a warning, when you see an quote unquote investment opportunity or a scheme or something of that nature, it's like you kind of have to look for three things. So the three factors are: is it fast, is it a lot, and is it easy? If it's all three of these things, it's probably a scam. You can only have two. Really, if it's fast and it's a lot, it's not going to be easy. If it's a lot and it's easy, it's not going to be fast.
So now, as we all know, unfortunately for a lot of people, the scheme has collapsed, leaving a lot of people disillusioned. So from your perspective, what can we all learn from this?
Yeah, so with that, I'd say that people need to make their best effort to do their own due diligence to make sure that whoever they're entrusting their hard-earned savings with are, reputable. They have some kind of track record that you can refer to, and they actually explain it in a way that you can understand. Like if it's a situation where you have no idea what's going on, you don't understand the product or whatever it is you're investing into at all, and when you ask people a question, they can't really give you a straightforward answer, that should raise red flags. I think when it comes to investing, again, especially for us over at BOSL, we don't look at it as a transactional type of things. It's like, because you're entrusting your hard-earned savings, we consider it more of like a partnership. Like we are in this together, and I'm going to do what's in your best interest. Like I'm literally required by law to act in your best interest, and also make sure that I invest in a manner that is in your long-term, within your long-term goals, basically.
Yeah. Should banks or regulators have done more to warn people about this earlier?
Yeah, so I think they did. They made their best efforts, I would say. I think a lot of it was a lot of people were kind of gaming the system, and it was kind of flying under the radar, and then banks were trying to close the accounts of people who were participating. I did see a few notices going out as well. I think it's a thing where when these types of things go viral, it's kind of hard to stop the momentum, Yeah.
Kind of hard to close Pandora's box once it's already open.
Yeah, basically.
I got you. Well, let's move on from that, and let's talk a little bit more about the role of banks in innovation and entrepreneurship. So let's imagine a future where banks in St. Lucia invest directly into high growth startups. If BOSL were to start making early stage equity investments, what would that look like?
Right. So it's kind of something that we are lobbying for in the background. I think when you look at what a bank or financial institution is meant to do, it's really to facilitate economic development, right? And part of the way that you do that is to help create the enabling environment. And as it relates to the startups and making direct equity investments into those, there are some challenges there because, from a risk to reward standpoint on the bank side, there are certain challenges there where your typical founder might be opposed to giving up a certain amount of equity or, taking on a certain type of debt financing, because they might say like, oh, that's me giving up too much of my business or something like that. There's also the challenge of startups most startups within our region not being as scalable, because of course our markets are somewhat disjointed, though that's improving pretty quickly, I would say. So you do have some of these challenges, but in terms of, I would like to say that we try to be more solution oriented more than focus on what's wrong and why we can't do it, right? So in a situation where you do have a startup that is bankable, they have a strong team, they have a scalable product, or a scalable or a very large addressable market, for example, um, I think it warrants taking a very serious look.
Yeah.
And I imagine that in a situation like that, naturally, because it's the depositors' funds at risk, you'd really want to make sure there's certain guardrails in terms of the governance, or being able to perhaps have some kind of influence, like on a board seat or a board observer seat or something like that. So I'd say, like, in a not too distant future, I wouldn't be surprised to see more banks within the region starting to gain some more comfort and building those types of partnerships with some of our startups in the region.
So beyond capital, what kind of ecosystem support or mentorship do you think banks should be offering?
Yeah, so in terms of the ecosystem support, I would say definitely trying to support the training and development programs, being facilitators of those, helping fund those. And I would also say that through those types of training programs, where you get lots of innovators in the same space, you'd typically see a lot of them start to collaborate. And I think from there, you also look at, hey, I'm one of the investors in this, or I'm like on the investor team that has made a capital injection into a startup. How can I provide like mentorship or insights or leverage my network to put this startup in the best position to succeed?
Yeah. So are any of these support systems on the map for BOSL fund management?
Yeah, so I would say we're a subsidiary of the overall bank. In terms of BOSL, I do know that they do have some capacity building programs in terms of making sure that the clients that they lend to are financially literate, and they understand like their loan financing, they understand like their assets versus their liabilities.
Yeah.
They get certain training so that they can better navigate these things, because when the bank lends somebody money, they become a going concern. So we would want to make sure that you're in the best position to be able to repay those loans, so that we can continue to do what we do. I would say that it's definitely something that's like on the cards, and it's something that I think would continue to grow over time, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for financial literacy, not just with our businesses, but with our students, with young people, older people as well, how can we teach that to them in a more impactful way?
Right. So I think when it comes to financial literacy, financial education, I like to call it a labor of love, basically, because you don't really get all the thanks or recognition for it, but you do feel the impact for it a lot later down the road. And I would say just being consistent, going into the schools, making sure that you have that engagement, you have your constant education campaigns so that people can understand, this is the agreement that you're going into, or this is the impact of doing this, or this is the importance of keeping track of these different things.
Yeah. So let's talk about fintech and the potential for fintech. Beyond buzzwords, how can technology actually help solve real social and economic problems in St. Lucia?
Right. So in terms of fintech, I would say that it's still something that we really in the early stages of within our region. I would say, like, the market is still fairly unsophisticated. I think fintech would give us an opportunity to increase our outreach to those who are traditionally underbanked. It would give us an opportunity to be more efficient, more accurate. It's just a matter of being creative and a little audacious to, not take things for face value from, let's say like a developed world, like a developed market product, and just think like, oh, it's apples to apples. We need to be aware that we have our own nuances within our region and build solutions that are made for us, and who better to make it for us than us. Exactly.
Yes. What role do you think the bank should play in supporting or adopting fintech innovation?
Yeah, so naturally, like I mentioned earlier, we as financial institutions, we have an obligation to facilitate economic development and to create the enabling environment. So I would say by, when it makes business sense, adopting some of these. I think every bank within the region wants to be more efficient. They want to be able to serve their customers better. They want to make things easier for their customers as well as like their staff. So it's a situation where, of course, certain things take a little bit of time, but more and more, I would say that they're starting to increase like the uptake of, some of these financial technology solutions.
So do we even have the infrastructure to support a serious fintech growth right now?
I would say yes and no, because when it comes to the funding aspect of things, the banks within our region haven't traditionally invested in what we call alternative investments, so like your private equities, your startups. So with that said, a lot of banks would probably have to amend their investment policies to facilitate something like that. And of course, that comes with putting the necessary guardrails and governance structures in place as well.
Yeah.
Some of these take a little bit of time and lobbying, and and then on top of that, in terms of actually incorporating these different solutions into the operations, it's a situation where I think more and more we're getting better computer science, IT professionals, within the region. More of them are coming back home or opting to stay home, like yourself. So I imagine that would naturally lead to, more adoption of these fintech solutions too.
Yeah. Do you have any trends or technologies that you think we should be paying attention to over the next 5 years in fintech?
You see, I can't go too much into that because I feel like it might be construed as like an endorsement or something like that. Yeah, but I would say as it relates to, solutions that would augment like our loan underwriting capabilities, or, more robust personal banking, mobile banking solutions, so so that you can better track your expenses or like what's going on in your account, and so you can have your brokerage account on your banking platform, so you can check your loans, make your bill payments and all of that, like just an all-in-one type of solution, and just improve the overall user experience, user interface aspect of things as well.
Giving us a few ideas on stuff to build.
Yeah.
Stuff that could be in the pipeline. What do you think a truly digital first financial system would look like for a small island nation?
A digital first financial system.
Yeah.
When you ask me that, my imagination is going kind of wild, but then I have to kind of reel myself in and say like, okay, what's practical as well? Wow. I don't know, like I don't really know how to put it into words too much, just because we kind of operating from almost a blank slate, so the possibilities are really endless. Everything from making it easier to open a bank account in like 20 minutes, like, and fund it right from your phone or something like that. Being able to apply for a loan or apply for a mortgage and be able to put all of your documents like right there on your banking app from your phone. Things like, making international payments or accepting international payments. I know that's a big challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs as well. Just making it more efficient so that the cost of doing business as well becomes a lot lower. There's just so many different things that we can tackle.
Yeah, I got you. I guess my next question would be, what's your message to the next generation of entrepreneurs and investors in the region? What would you say?
Right. So, in terms of my message to the next generation entrepreneurs and who else?
Investors.
Investors. I would say that if you're blessed with talent as well as, maybe education or opportunity in general, it's my personal belief that you have an obligation to make your contribution to national development, whether that be St. Lucia or the wider Caribbean. It's important that we go above and beyond, continue to punch above our weight to be the change that we want to see, and that we remain audacious and not settle for quote unquote good enough. Yeah.
Do you think that we in the Caribbean have a scarcity mindset when it comes to money and innovation?
I would say in general, yes. I would say the average person thinks that, okay, I don't want to share my idea because this person might steal it, or I don't want to share details on whatever opportunity or whatever new trend because, I might not be able to take advantage of it as much. I think that we just kind of need to think bigger. Again, we are operating from a standpoint where the canvas is pretty blank. So we should be focusing on growing the pie rather than fighting for, small slices.
Yeah. If there's one shift that you'd like to see in how we approach money, would that be it?
Most definitely. I think that, not only should we think a bit broader, but also it's just a situation where I think everybody has the ability, the right to want more for themselves. And, it's on myself and other people within the industry as well as other innovators to create the environment where we can have inclusive, opportunities to build wealth and get involved.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Jurgen. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners?
No, I think we covered everything pretty well, yeah.
Okay.
But thanks for having me, for sure.
Yes, thank you for coming. And actually, I forgot to mention this at the beginning. This is our first time being physically in the Innovation Hub for a Tech Talk Tuesday. So I'd like to thank Jurgen so much for coming in. Jurgen, what do you think of the hub?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's really what we need in terms of a co-working space. I think it'll bring together a lot of innovators, entrepreneurs who in the future I imagine will begin collaborating. It's sorely needed, and keep doing what you guys are doing.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for listening and for joining us on another Tech Talk Tuesday. Please be sure to follow us, like, comment, subscribe, our LinkedIn, our Instagram, our Facebook. Thank you so much.
All right.